Good afternoon, everyone. We resume the afternoon session of this program with a lecture on tissue engineering by Dr. Divya. Dr. Divya has completed her BDS in the year 2003 from VS Dental College and Hospital, Bangalore. She successfully completed her post-graduation from KLE Institute of Dental Sciences, Bangalore in the year 2009. Since then, she is working as a teaching faculty at RV Dental College, Bangalore. Divya has a significant number of scientific publications and presentations to her credit. She has also authored a book. She was part of an organizing team for pre-conference courses for ISP National Conference in the year 2010. I am the moderator for this session. Dr. Divya, I welcome you. You may begin your presentation now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fauzia. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Dr. Divya?
Am I audible? Good afternoon, ma'am. Am I audible? Hello? Hello, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Dr. Divya?
Yes, ma'am. Are you able to see my presentation?
No, you have stopped sharing.
Sorry, one moment. I apologize. I just start now.
Yes, now.
Ma'am, is it fine? Okay. A very good afternoon. Ma'am, is it visible now, the presentation?
Yes.
Yes. Very good afternoon. I'm very honored to have received this opportunity to speak to all of you today. I thank BAP and MR Ambedkar Dental College for this opportunity. And I'm also very thankful to the team here in RV, our HOD, staff and students for always having my back. So this topic, tissue engineering, is a bit vast, but I will try to make it as concise as possible. Anyway, you will have the presentation and you can always come back to me with any questions that you would like to ask. So the two objectives that I have today is one, to give you an overview of the topic, and the second is to get you people a little interested in this topic. So let me start off with, so basically tissue engineering is a biological solution to a biological problem, correct? So it is not something where you're using a prosthesis to replace a missing part. It is something that we are going to synthesize from cells obtained from our own body. So as you can see in this cartoon, you can see they have like a 3D printer, and this is something, of course, this is made in light of the situation, but you can imagine if you have a printer like this in a surgical operatory and you can get any tissue just like that at, just a click of a button, and you can put this in the patient's body. How amazing that would be, right? The main issue that we have is, as we all know, one, either we have to go for a prosthesis to replace a missing part, or we are depending on tissues and organs donated by people which do not always match, correct? So it would be wonderful if our own cells can produce a new tissue and this engineered tissue can be replaced in our body. So let me start off with the definition. Tissue engineering is an emerging multidisciplinary field that applies the principles of biology and engineering to the development of viable substitutes that restore, maintain, or improve the function of human tissues. This was given by Langer and Viganti. So as it says, it's a multidisciplinary field. What do we mean by this? So here we have a clinician, a periodontist, and then we have a cell biologist, and we also have a bioengineer who will develop a scaffold, and there will be seeding of these cells and these tissues will be developed, right? And what we are aiming at, there is a missing part, maybe a periodontal ligament and bone loss, and we want to restore it, we want to maintain it, and we want a functional tissue which will support our tooth. So that is the definition. So the history, we can say that the talk about tissue engineering has a biblical reference, where they have said that God had taken the rib from a man and he had constructed a woman's body with this rib. So that would be the oldest reference to this concept. And in 1996, if you can see, just amazing. They had, Vacanti had created this Vacanti's mouse, and you can see he had grown a human ear on this mouse, which he fondly called the Auriculosaurus. What is happening now today? They are trying to grow a human ear from a structure of an apple. So they came up with this concept that the mechanical construct of a scaffold, right? So they said the apple sort of looks like a human ear. You can see the resemblance here. So they said that the cells, they will take up the shape of the scaffold that they're put into. And the shape of the scaffold is very important. So they have tried to regenerate a human ear from an apple. Also in China, what they have been doing is they have done this study wherein they have taken chondrocytes from the opposite ear, and in the missing ear has been regenerated using the cells from this tissue. So earlier, as we all know, prostheses have been constructed, but here you can actually see a fully functional, normal looking ear. Okay. Another fascinating thing that I found is that they have, thanks to my student Rashmi for showing me this. So with the spinach leaf, they have tried to recreate the structure of a human heart, and you can see all those arterioles and things. So we are at the precipice of something that is amazing, and we should be happy that we are able to witness all this. It is really lucky. So, but there are, of course, issues. Okay, there are issues with scaffolds. There are issues with the cells. There are issues with the biological mediators. And the periodontal ligament is, as we know, this entire periodontium is a very complicated structure. You have mineralized tissue, you have non-mineralized tissue, you have an epithelial and a connective tissue interface. And to regenerate all this in an environment which is full of bacteria, microorganisms, and also mechanical forces is fairly difficult. So the conventional approaches that we have come across are, of course, we have used growth factors, we have used membranes, we have used bone grafts, and we have used various stem cells, right? So this approach that we are dealing with, tissue engineering, is basically a combination of all these. So the principles of tissue engineering, one is the conductive approach. This deals with space maintenance. So whenever there is a lost tissue, tissues from the other areas will try to grow into this. So a space has to be maintained to allow the host cells to come in and lay down the original type of tissue. So this is the conductive approach. The second is the inductive approach, which, as you all know, we are going to induce, okay, with growth factors, adjacent cells to come inside and lay down the desirable tissue. And the third is cell transplantation, wherein you're actually replacing the cells. Okay, so we will be talking about all these. Just remember the three things, approaches that have been talked about are conductive, inductive, and cell transplantation. So the triad, this is a very important thing you should talk about. The triad of tissue engineering is, on one side you have a scaffold. Okay, so this is like my son doing homework. Okay, so you're going to put him in a room. That is the scaffold. He has to be sort of enclosed there so that he doesn't run out, right? And then the cell is my son basically, but he refuses to do homework, and this is a fact, without biscuits. So that is like your biological factor. So what has to be done is the homework, that is recreating the periodontal ligament and other structures. And you have the scaffold, the room wherein he's put, and you have the triggering factors, the biological factors which are going to help the cells in producing your matrix and your other substances, right? So we'll start off with scaffolds. Scaffolds, basically the function of a scaffold is main function is, like I said, to maintain that space and structure so that cells will be able to regrow the type of tissue. And since we need cells to come in and grow the tissue, am I audible? Is there any issue?
Yeah. Dr. Fauzia, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Hide the dialogue box there, Dr. Divya.
What happened, Dr. Fauzia?
There's a dialogue box open. You need to hide that.
There's a dialogue box, is it?
The one that's saying, stop sharing. There's a dialogue box. So please click on the option hide.
Okay.
Hi.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Sorry to bother.
No, thank you. So, as I was mentioning, the main function of a scaffold, of course, one is the delivery, right? So you can use the scaffold to deliver your growth factors and things like that. It also maintains space so that there is no tissue growth from the outside to inside. Also, mind you, we don't want this tissue to go out and have ectopic tissue formation, right? So we want what has to, like, what stays in happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, like that. We want these cells to remain here. We don't want it going out, and we don't want outside cells to come inside either, right? So it maintains that shape. It also has a barrier function, doesn't allow external cells to come in. It provides a matrix, okay, for cell adhesion, and it also acts as a delivery vehicle. So what are the ideal properties of a scaffold? This is pretty simple. It sort of integrates with what is the purpose of it, right? So any material that we use, it must be biocompatible, correct? It should not cause any immunogenic response. It should not cause any toxicity to the body. And we also want it to degrade eventually. We don't want the scaffold to stay, but it should not degrade so fast that the tissue has not formed. So there should be ideal degradation properties. And at the same time, it should not be degraded in such a way that the degradation products cause harm to the body. Correct? So what we want is a biocompatible material which degrades without causing any inflammatory reaction, and it degrades at a time desirable to us. Okay. And we also want, of course, cell anchorage. Okay, a production of your extracellular matrix should be possible within the scaffold. We want mechanical properties. Like I told you, that we want adequate stiffness. At the same time, we want certain amount of elasticity, and the shape should be maintained. Like I told you, you saw in that apple, they maintained the shape, and the shape of a ear was produced, right? So it should have good properties. The fabrication should be easy. So all these parameters should be seen in an ideal scaffold. So scaffolds have been classified. Please refer to the Perio 2000 volume 41. Okay, cell delivery. In this, scaffolds have been explained very well. So we have non-resorbable. All these terms are very familiar to you. Expanded polytetrafluoroethylene, ceramic, and titanium mesh. We will talk about each of these individually. And we have resorbable. Okay, so just like your suture classification, right? You have non-resorbable and resorbable. In resorbable, you have your alpha hydroxy acids, polyglycolic acid, poly L lactic acid, copolymers of polylactic co-glycolic acid, amino acid based polymers, collagen like proteins, and elastin like proteins. I will come to each of these individually. In the natural, okay, natural, you're familiar with all of these, right? You're familiar with collagen, which has been used as a membrane. You're familiar with hyaluronan. You're familiar with chitosan, gelatin, fibrin, right? These are not new terms to you. In synthetic, you have polyethylene glycol, polyethylene dioxide, and matrix extracts such as matrigen. So EPTFE, I won't go in detail. Okay, you know it was manufactured by W.L. Gore and Associates. And as a barrier membrane, it has two microstructures. The advantages it has or it offers are it's extremely resistant to chemical solvents. It's a very inert substance. Okay, it's a very inert substance. In ceramics, we have, of course, hydroxyapatite and your tricalcium phosphate. You're familiar with both these materials, I'm assuming, because they're used as bone grafts. They are biocompatible, of course. They are osseointegrative. We already know this, but their mechanical properties are not that great. Okay, so hydroxyapatite, it has poor strength. The problem with hydroxyapatite is, one, it doesn't degrade properly, and the second one is that the pores do not connect. So it is difficult. Why do we need pores? We need proper pores so that the vasculature can form properly, right? It has to connect in these pores. So these are the problems with hydroxyapatite. And the problem with tricalcium phosphate is it degrades very fast. So they have combined these two, hydroxyapatite and tricalcium phosphate, or tricalcium phosphate with synthetic polymers to make an adequate scaffold. We can also use titanium mesh. Okay, titanium mesh being a metal, of course, it has good stiffness and ease of handling. It is non-resorbable, so the advantage of this is if you're planning to regenerate a very large defect, you can achieve this because it's not degrading. So it will avoid that. It will provide that space for a really long time. It supports osteogenic expression of bone marrow stromal cells. And addition of fibronectin, collagen, and calcium phosphate, it can regulate the rate and formation of bone. Next, we come to scaffolds, which are alpha hydroxy acids. Okay, so these are mainly polyglycolic and polylactic co-glycolic acid. So these, the advantage of it is it can be manufactured. Okay, these are manufactured, so they can be manufactured into any shape or size, and they degrade without having any foreign body response. But the problem here is it is difficult to incorporate cells into it. Okay, so advantage, it can be synthesized in any shape or form, and it doesn't cause any foreign body response. Disadvantage, it is difficult to get cell adhesion. Alginate has been used. Okay, the way it is used is it is used as gelation. It is formed as a gel in the shape of a sphere, and whatever you want to deliver to that site can be delivered. Okay, so it's a very good vehicle for delivery rather than a scaffold per se. Okay, but we'll discuss it here. So what can you deliver through this? You can deliver stem cells, drugs, your antigens, proteins, vectors. Okay, so you can use it for delivering your genes, or you can use it for delivering your growth factors and things like that. So what happens when you put your stem cells in this kind of a droplet? So the stem cell, it doesn't allow cell to cell or cell to matrix interaction of any kind, but it does produce the growth factor. The cells produce growth factors and matrix components which can diffuse through this semi-permeable alginate membrane, and this can be available on the outside. Then we come to amino acid polymers. So these are used for cell seeding. So these are used for cell seeding, and these are mainly made through fermentation. So the problem here is you may have unwanted contaminants. That is the problem. And they resemble very much our own proteins which are present in the body. So you have either collagen-like or elastin-like amino acid polymers. Okay, so these are basically synthetic substitutes, okay, which are collagen-like or elastin-like. Okay, the main problem here is unwanted contaminants. Then we also have natural polymers. We are, as I said, very familiar with all these: collagen, elastin, fibrin, gelatin. Okay, again, they can be used as space fillers, cell seeding, and biomolecule delivery devices. They resemble the extracellular matrix, of course, okay, because they're a part of it. But the problem is they again have very poor mechanical properties, and they degrade very fast. Okay. So hyaluronate, it has a role in organogenesis, as you all are aware, and it also has properties of cell migration and helps in the development of tissues. And it may be cross-linked to make it more rigid. It is inert, completely biodegradable, and it supports the growth of fibroblasts, chondrocytes, and mesenchymal stem cells. So it's quite a good scaffold. Okay. Chitosan is similar to naturally occurring proteoglycans, and it is again biodegradable. The problem with all these natural elements is that their strength is lacking, but they are very, very biocompatible, which is a very good thing. Okay, but this particular thing is not supportive of cell growth, and it has to be modified for cell attachment. Collagen, again, we know it has excellent biocompatibility. Like I told you, all these natural elements are very biocompatible, and they're quite safe and good for cell seeding. So then we come to the synthetic hydrogels. This scaffolds part may be very technical, but we will come on to the more interesting things like stem cells and all. Please bear with me. So we have polyethylene glycol and polyethylene oxide, which are good for cell delivery. Okay, and by varying this cross-linking density, we can adjust the degradation profile. So we can get it to degrade when we want. Okay, and it is possible to construct thermally reversible hydrogels, and these can be degraded again hydrolytically and enzymatically, and they're FDA approved. So the last part, we come to extracellular matrix extracts. So we know that many skin and extracellular matrix substitutes such as Matrigel, Dermagraft, Apligraf, and Epidex, they allow incorporation of cells. Okay, and studies have been done where they have been used for scaffold to induce bone formation in osseous defects in vivo. So the new thing that is there in scaffolds is, of course, nanotechnology. So nanotechnology is basically the formation of structures which have very good properties. Okay, and by using this nano composite hydrogel scaffold, they have managed to create all three tissues outside. Okay, so they managed to create a scaffold where there are three divisions which allow for the formation of a separate cementum layer, a periodontal ligament layer in between, and an alveolar bone, and the entire structure can be placed back. Okay, so this is what nanotechnology offers. So then we'll come to a more interesting part, as I consider it, stem cell research. Okay, so we finished with scaffolds. Now we'll go to stem cells. So the term stem cell was coined by Alexander Microsoft in 1908. Then as you see what all they have tried to do, so they have found self-renewing cells in the mouse bone marrow. Followed by that, they have come up with a bone marrow transplant between two siblings. Following that, they have discovered the embryonic stem cell. Okay, this was a very important part where they isolated embryonic cells from the blastocyst, which was able to develop even into a new person. Okay, and then they also let's fast forwarding it. They have also found out that now embryonic stem cells can be isolated without the destruction of embryo. In the dental field, what has happened? As you see, very rapidly, okay, before 1985, not much. After that, so rapidly within this time, they have found so many types of cells, okay. Yamamura, he said in pulp, there may be stem cells, okay. He said this in 1985. In 2000, they isolated these dental pulp cells. 2003, they isolated the cells from the exfoliated deciduous teeth, okay, shed, which is from human exfoliated deciduous teeth. 2004, they managed to isolate it from periodontal ligament. 2005, they isolated it from dental follicle. 2006, they isolated it from apical papilla. 2009, from the human gingiva. So imagine how many types of stem cells they were able to get from the tooth and surrounding structures in such a short span of time. I think all of you are familiar with Melcher. He, of course, said periodontium is a source of 3 types of cells, which we know are the cementoblasts, fibroblasts, osteoblasts. McCulloch, he was the one who said that these progenitor cells are present next to the vasculature in the periodontal ligament. So we will talk about the stem cells. So what is the function of these stem cells? It can do 2 things. One, it can give rise to more stem cells, okay, more undifferentiated cells, which further have the capacity to form new lineages, okay, or it can change into many cell types, okay. So it can form 2 types of things. Either it can replicate itself or it can differentiate to form various types of other stem cells. Lately, we have also come with this cord blood banking, which all of you must be familiar with. As soon as the baby is born, they cut off the cord. The blood from here is collected. It is transported and it is stored in a nitrogen storage capacity. And this can be used later during the life of the child. The types of stem cells very quickly. We have a totipotent cell, okay, which can develop into a new individual. Okay, so this is basically your, it's taken from your blastocyst. It is your embryonic stem cell, which can form any other tissue. Okay, then you have the pluripotent. You can see the chart on the right. Okay, the picture on the right. So you have, of course, the totipotent, which can form a whole new individual. Then that gives rise to pluripotent cells, which can give rise to many tissues, but it can not form an entire individual. Okay. Then you have multipotent stem cells, which is basically your adult stem cells. They can give rise to parts of your ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. Okay. But it cannot form anything and everything. That is somewhat limited. Oligopotent, it can form some tissues, not all. Okay, this is the next layer where you have neural progenitor cells, endodermal progenitor cells, and basically your progenitor cells, which are not fully differentiated. They do not have as much capacity as multipotent, but still they can form some structures. And then last we come to the unipotent cells, which can form only one structure, okay, which is your neuron, your gut cell, and your erythrocyte. So just a bit of humor to, sort of break the monotony. So the cell says, I'm so confused. So the adult stem cell says, but you can be whoever you want, right? So a stem cell can pretty much be whoever it wants. So again, totipotent, complete human body, pluripotent, almost all tissues, multipotent, many cell types, unipotent, like in the name, single cell type. So ignore the thing on the left. Let's go to the right. According to the origin, okay, so it can be derived from embryo, which is your embryonic stem cell, or from your fetus. It can be derived from your infant, which is your umbilical cord and Wharton's jelly, or from the adult, which can be mesenchymal, hematopoietic, neural, gastrointestinal, epidermal, hepatic, or pancreatic, right? So one was based on ability to differentiate. How much can it divide? What all structures can it form? The second is where is it taken from? Okay, based on that. So I'll just like to quickly tell you the advantages and disadvantages of each of these cells. So your totipotent stem cell, the advantages of course are it can form anything, right? It is unlimited phenotypic potential, but there are ethical objections, right? So when you tamper with the embryo, that is that you have it's a living right, you sort of damage the embryo, and that has very serious ethical implications. Am I right? And also, whenever these cells are taken, there is always a chance of tumors being formed. Okay, so that is another constraint that you must be careful about. In case of the pluripotent or multipotent stem cells, there is only a limited kind of phenotypes that can form. But especially when you take it from the adult stem cells, right? Like whatever I told you, you take from the periodontal ligament or you take it from any of those places. The advantage is you're taking it from the same person and you're putting it back in the same person. So you're not so concerned about immunogenic effects. You're not so concerned about, there are no ethical concerns as such. And also it is easy to obtain, right? It is easy to obtain this. You're not damaging any structures. There is one more type of stem cell which is very important here. It is an induced pluripotent stem cell. What does this mean? This is basically an adult stem cell which has been converted, okay, to have the features of an embryonic stem cell. Is it clear? So they've done some research, and through genetic engineering and things like that, they've been able to induce the characteristics of an embryonic stem cell in your adult stem cell. So this is quite ideal. Okay, so again, it doesn't cause any immune response because it is taken from the same person, and you also have an unlimited quantity. But again, it can cause tumors, and we do not know yet how stable these cells will be. Okay, because they're still in, the work is in progress. So what are the types of dental stem cells? Okay, so you can see this is from the third molar. Okay, TGPC is from the third molar, the germ cells are taken. Okay, then you have the dental follicle. Can you see the dental follicle which is surrounding the tooth? You have that as a source. Then you have the stem cells from the apical papilla. You can see at the tip of the developing roots. Now, this cannot be taken from an already developed root. Okay, it has to be from a developing root. From the tip of the apex of the tooth, you can get your stem cells. And then you have the so this is the dental follicle stem cells. This is the apical papilla stem cells. And then you have the dental pulp stem cells from the dental pulp. And you have the periodontal ligament stem cells from the periodontal ligament. And then you have your stem cells from human exfoliated deciduous teeth, which you can get from the deciduous teeth. And then you also have cells from the developing gingiva. Okay, this is the bone marrow stromal cells, and this is from salivary glands. So when can you take these stem cells? So when you have a tooth germ, okay, so the tooth is not yet developed, it is in the developing stage. That time you can take dental follicle cells, okay, and then before in your deciduous teeth, it is a source of both pulpal cells, and when it is being shed, ironically the name is also shed, okay, you have stem cells from the human exfoliated deciduous teeth. And in the permanent tooth, before eruption, you can have from your apical papilla, right, stem cells from apical papilla and stem cells from the developing gingiva. These two are not there after eruption. So after eruption, you only have dental pulp and periodontal ligament stem cells. So what is the advantage of human deciduous exfoliated cells? It is easy to obtain. Okay, because anyway, these children will be shedding their teeth. So there is no trauma and there is no risk of any oncogenesis. And it is a highly proliferative cell. Okay, it can differentiate into multiple types of tissues. And since it's going to be again used in the same patient, chances of rejection are also not there. How is it isolated? So you're going to isolate the cells, and then you're going to see the viability. You're going to freeze it, and you're going to expand it, and then you can return it. Okay. So I'm sorry. So some studies have been done. I'll just sip a glass of water. Sorry. So in miniature pigs, they have taken these cells from the deciduous teeth and they have implanted it in parasymphyseal defects which have been created, and they found new bone. Also, they have taken cells from a dog and combined it with PRP, these deciduous stem cells, and they have again found that mature bone has been regenerated. Now we come to stem cells from the dental follicle. So dental follicle is again very precious because even during development, it is responsible for formation of three key structures that we desire, isn't it? The alveolar bone, the periodontium, and the acellular cementum. So it has this capacity, and that is why it is such a great kind of stem cell. So again, they have compared the regenerative capacities of periodontal ligament stem cells from the dental pulp and the follicle, and they have found that dental follicle cells were able to create cementum, Sharpie's fibers of PDL, but PDL cells seem to have a better capacity at doing the same thing. Okay. Then cells from the adult pulp. Okay, so obviously when taken from the pulp, they have a greater ability to form the dentine and the root complex. Okay, so they have also done studies where they have taken cells from the pulp. Okay, and they've taken cells from the periodontal ligament. They've used a combination. So what they achieved, they were able to regenerate part of the tooth, okay, through the pulp cells. They were able to regenerate a functional periodontium through the periodontal ligament stem cells. So they were able to regenerate kind of the entire unit, okay, which I think is quite amazing. So periodontal ligament stem cells again are able to lead to the formation of so many types of tissues, right? And they have been combined with your tricalcium phosphate, and they have been able to regenerate cementum and PDL-like structures. So far, all the stem cells that we were talking about, they were they are able to form structures which don't exactly resemble the cementum and PDL. But when you use stem cells from PDL, you are able to generate structures which resemble these structures exactly, okay? Then we come to stem cells from root apical papilla. Like I mentioned to you, they are located at the tips of the growing roots, and they're present only at the time of root development, before the tooth erupts. You can't take them after the tooth develops. So stem cells from apical papilla, when they were transported into mice, okay, transplanted into mice, they have been found to form a functional root periodontal complex. Then we come to embryonic stem cells. So far what we were talking about, all these shed and your scap and your periodontal ligament stem cells, and all those were your adult stem cells, okay? So embryonic stem cells, these are taken from your blastocyst, okay? So in 1998, Thompson and co-workers, they said that you can take it from a blastocyst, and this they found out by extracting cells from a person who was undergoing fertility treatment. So what are the characteristics of this cell? Like I said, it is taken from the blastocyst, and they can divide into so many, they can divide 200 times at least, okay? At least 200 times replication is possible. And then they are pluripotent. You can form all the types of layers. You can form ectodermal cells. You can form nerve, hair, skin, brain, eyes, ears. Okay. You can have cells of mesodermal origin. It gives rise to muscles, blood vessels, connective tissue. It also gives rise to endodermal cells. Okay. So there is the potential that it has is tremendous. Okay. It can form anything. But there are challenges, okay? So here they're joking, you left the stem cells sitting for too long, so they've turned into babies, okay? That is, of course, not the challenge. But the challenge, like I told you, in embryonic stem cells, the challenge is that it may turn into tumors, okay? And it may have some ethical constraints, and we do not, it's not very safe to use, okay? And also, we do not want to take cells from a blastocyst because there is a kind of ethical concern. The problem with adult stem cells is that it has only the capacity to differentiate is somewhat limited. Both these challenges are met by the induced pluripotent stem cells, where the adult stem cells are converted to have the characteristics of embryonic stem cells, but it's still in its latency. So let us see where that will go. So we come to the last part, which is biological mediators. So like I mentioned before, for true regeneration, 4 different types of tissues have to be regenerated in a very challenging environment full of microorganisms where there are constant forces. But and there has to be a cascading effect, okay? There are many stem cells, there are many types of growth factors, cytokines. All of these have to come together like a drama, okay? Where every player has to play his part. So growth factor, what is it? It is basically a term used to denote a protein. Okay, it's a naturally occurring protein which can promote mitogenesis, directed migration, and metabolic activity of cells. So what is a growth factor? How is it different from a cytokine? So growth factors and cytokines are very similar. So cytokines also have an effect on other cells, but this could be a destructive effect or it could be a constructive effect. But with growth factors, it's mainly a promotion. Okay, it's a more positive effect, which is helping in cell proliferation, cell migration, and cell differentiation to form new structures. Okay, and the principal growth factors that promote healing are platelet-derived growth factor, transforming growth factor beta, vascular endothelial growth factor, insulin-like growth factor, and your basic fibroblast growth factor. So there are some commercial products also available, okay? Like platelet-derived growth factor has been combined with your beta-tricalcium phosphate to have a product called GEM21S. And see, if you see all these, anyway, you will get the presentation. I will not go too much into detail here. So all of these, if you can see, they help in the proliferation of fibroblasts and they have an osteogenic effect. And they also help in the recruitment of stem cells. In addition to this, if you see your P15, your PepGen 15, it also has TGF beta expression. And your endogains, they also reduce inflammation, increase angiogenesis, and also have the expression of TGF beta and insulin-like growth factor. So we'll talk about each of these. So what are transcription factors? Once this question also has been asked, transcription factors. So how are these different from growth factors? They're quite similar. So growth factors, what they do is they attach to the receptor on the cell and they can lead to a cell differentiating into another kind of cell or proliferation of that cell or whatever it is. Now once a growth factor acts on a cell, these transcription factors can get signaled and they get attached to the DNA and they can change the genetic composition of that cell and they will decide what proteins are formed or what happens with that cell is finally decided by these transcription factors. Is it clear? So these growth factors are attaching to the receptors on the cell. These are inducing the transcription factors and the transcription factors are finally deciding what is going to happen. Okay, so if you see this, this is again given very nicely in Perio 2000 volume 41. So I suggest you read it where it talks about the differentiation of osteoblasts. So here you have your multipotent mesenchymal stem cell. Okay, the first type of stem cell that you got from your donor, you have that here. So when you had a transcription factor PPAR gamma acting on it, it formed an adipocyte. Don't get confused. Okay, these are just names. You can remember them. So you have a cell, if PPAR gamma, which is the transcription factor, acts on it, it will form an adipocyte. On the other hand, if SOX9, that is another transcription factor, acts on it, it will form a chondrocyte. Okay. At the same time, there is a transcription factor called as TAZ. If there is an action of TAZ at this point of time, it will lead to the formation of committed osteoprogenitor stem cell. So that is sort of pushing. It's like a gate pass. Okay. So at the gate, if you're saying I'm section A, you go to classroom A. That is your transcription factor. It is like your hall ticket that you get. Okay. So if your hall ticket says A, you go to A. If it says B, you go to B. If you say C, you go to C. Right. So you can form bone or cartilage or adipose. Right. Similar to that. So if it says TAZ on your hall ticket, then you will be pushed towards becoming an osteoblast. Okay, I'm sorry for this really funny comparison. So then after that, you also have other transcription factors which play a role. So this is during the beginning of it. Once it is pushed into the stream, then when you have RUNX2 and Osterix acting on it, it can lead to the formation of your osteoblast, which can finally form your osteocyte. So then we come to the other biological mediators, okay? Platelet-derived growth factors, they are polypeptide growth factors released from activated platelets during blood clotting. We all know this, right? During blood clotting, you have platelet-derived growth factors. But they're also expressed by most human tissues, and they're very powerful cytokines with a very important role in wound healing. So these have been used in chronic soft tissue non-healing wounds. Okay, so do we know any chronic soft tissue non-healing wounds? So you would have come. Okay, let me rush through this a little. I think we're running short of time. Okay, so in diabetic ulcers and things like that, we have your platelet-derived growth factor. So it is it has 4 polypeptide chains and has 5 isoforms. You can look into this. So I'll go through this very quickly. It promotes osteoblast proliferation, doesn't have an effect on differentiation. So what you must understand here is there are some growth factors which will help the osteoblast to proliferate. There are some which will help it to differentiate. So even when you are trying to regenerate tissues, you want some growth factors to come before and you want some growth factors to come later. You do not want them all to come in together, right? This is a very strong stimulator of mesenchymal stem cell proliferation, and there are a lot of studies done on it, and it has also been combined with your insulin-like growth factor. Okay, so what are the advantages? This combination is a very good combination. Please remember that platelet-derived growth factor with insulin-like growth factor, both are chemotactic for fibroblasts. While insulin-like growth factor promotes collagen synthesis, platelet-derived growth factor promotes non-collagenous proteins such as your bone shallow protein, osteonectin, and things like that. So the combination of it is very good for produce your extracellular bone matrix, and they act synergistically to help in soft tissue healing. Then we have your platelet-rich therapies, which will be, I think, covered under periodontal regeneration. You have a lecture later. Just remember that these therapies, they provide a lot of growth factors such as platelet-derived growth factor, transforming growth factor, insulin-like growth factor, and your vascular endothelial growth factor. Then we have your transforming growth factor, beta, which is in the isoforms of 1 to 5. And again, it helps in forming a pool of osteoblasts early during healing. Okay. During later stages, it blocks it from differentiating and mineralization. And also how it acts depends on the dose at which it is produced. And also it's a complex reaction based on other growth factors which are present. They are synthesized as a precursor molecule and get activated by the release of a C-terminal by the proteolysis. Now we come to fibroblast growth factor. They have a critical role in angiogenesis. I'm sorry I'm going so fast, but this matter will be given to you. Okay, I just want you to be familiar with these terms. So fibroblast growth factor, one important thing is it has a very good role in angiogenesis. Okay, again, it doesn't allow differentiation of the osteoblast. So if you put this towards the later side of the cycle, you will not have osteoblastic differentiation at all. So what you should do is fibroblast growth factor should be introduced before. So you will have a proliferation and you will have a colony of osteoblasts, and later you have to take it out from the scaffold so that you can allow the cells to differentiate. Okay. I think I will skip these factors. You can go through this presentation slowly. Okay, but one thing I want you to know is all of these factors together. I will put there is a flow chart. Let me just come to that. Okay, I think this will help me summarize on the growth factors. So what we have is a mesenchymal stem cell. Okay, so can you see those lines when which factor is coming into play? So you have a role for bone morphogenetic proteins, which is going from mesenchymal stem cell up to the pre-osteoblast. Okay, the fibroblast growth factor, like I told you, it has to come in before. It will help in forming an osteoblast and proliferation of an osteoblast, but later it has to be removed because it doesn't help in cell differentiation, right? So it will help in forming a pre-osteoblast. Then you introduce the platelet-derived growth factor, okay, which will further help in proliferation and migration. And insulin-like growth factor comes in the end. Okay, so there has to be a cascade of events. It cannot all be put in together like a cocktail. It has to come in one at a time so that it plays its individual role and then it goes off. Okay, is this clear? This is again taken from your Perio 2000, volume 41. Please refer to that. And if you have any doubts, you can feel free to contact me. Okay, so the advances in tissue engineering are you have cell sheet engineering. Okay, so here what they are doing is, in the conventional technique, they were using trypsin. Okay, so they cultured the cells, and then to remove the cells from the culture, they used an enzyme like trypsin, which broke it away. But the problem that is created is there were defects in the cell membranes created by the action of this enzyme. So now what they have done is they have used a responsive polymer, poly N isopropyl acyclamide. And what they have done with this is you get a sheet. Okay, so I will talk about this in detail. What they have done is, so they're not using an enzyme anymore. Okay, so enzyme can damage the cells. So what they're doing is they're placing a polymer on this plate. At the temperature of 37 degrees, the cells will get attached to this polymer, and they will form a sheet, a continuous sheet. And when you change the temperature to 20 degrees, it will just come out. Okay, from this, like one sheet, it can be removed. Okay, so do you understand the advantage of this? You do not require a scaffold. Okay, because the cells are already attached to each other. You can just take it, place it on the root surface, and it doesn't even have to be sutured. It can be used. Okay, so without a scaffold, and disadvantages of a scaffold, this can be used. Only problem is if there's a very large amount of tissue that you want to regenerate, then multiple times this procedure has to be done, and it's quite technique sensitive. So is it clear? Did you understand? So usually cells are removed from the culture by using enzymes. Instead of that, what we are doing is we are placing a polymer, okay, which is thermally reactive. So at 37 degrees, the cells get attached to this polymer and they form a sheet like this, okay. And then at 20 degrees, the sheet just comes out from the culture. Okay, so I will not go into the details. You can look into my presentation, and I have already spoken about the advantages and disadvantages. The other advancement is gene delivery based approaches, where what they are doing is they are using either viral or non-viral vectors. They're introducing a gene into the nucleus. You can see this piece of gene has been replaced. So that can alter several functions of the cell, and it can also help in the formation of various growth factors, right? So gene delivery also has been used. The various viruses used are retrovirus, adenovirus, adeno-associated virus, non-viral methods such as naked DNA, DNA polymer complex, plasmid, and hybrid methods like virosomes. Okay, the goal is to transfer the DNA of interest into the cell and to synthesize recombinant proteins. So there are some systematic reviews where they have used pulpal tissue, and they have found that the characteristic of the scaffold determines the type of tissue that is formed. And pulpal cells are effective in forming dentine and pulp-like tissue. This is a systematic review where they have said that there are many challenges in developing clinically safe tissue, okay, but there is definitely a need for this, and the future of these therapies seems to be promising. And we also have a systematic review on mesenchymal stromal cells, and there they have said that there is a lot of heterogeneity present. Okay, all studies are not saying the same thing. The challenge is to find the best combination, which is the cell, which is a scaffold, which is the biologic mediator, which will help in producing the right type of tissue. And animal models may not show the exact results that we can obtain in human beings. This is another challenge that has been found. The questions that have come on this topic are growth factors, bone morphogenetic proteins, and PRP is dealt in another class for you. Stem cells and periodontal therapy, transcription factors, biology of periodontal wound healing, which is again beyond the scope because that's another topic on its own, but be prepared for these topics. And in paper 4, you may get application of tissue engineering and periodontal defects. So you can get biological mediators, what I told you. You can expect scaffolds also, though it's not come. Scaffolds also can be expected. Transcription factors can be expected, okay, and stem cells can be expected. Or in a paper 4, the entire thing has to be answered in this format. So you can talk about conventional techniques for regeneration like root biomodification, membranes, bone grafts very briefly. Define tissue engineering, I told you what it is. The triad of tissue engineering, which is cells, scaffolds, and biologic mediators. The historical perspective, when, what developed. The scaffolds, the various types, resorbable, non-resorbable, and then you have synthetic and natural, the properties of each. The stem cells, in which you have embryonic cells, you have your adult stem cells, and then you have your induced pluripotent cells. The biological mediators, where you have the various roles for platelet-derived growth factor, insulin-like growth factor, transforming factor, fibroblast growth factor. And last is your advances, where you can talk about cell sheet engineering and gene therapy. So these are my references. Here I would like to mention that Perio 2000 volume 41 is given, all these details are given really well. One reading may be a little difficult to understand, but second reading, I assure you, makes it very simple and nice. So I'd like to conclude with saying, for imitation is natural to man from his infancy. Man differs from other animals, particularly in this, that he is imitative and acquires his rudiments of knowledge in this way. Besides, the delight in it is universal. So we are trying to imitate tissues as they are, and the results we are getting is fantastic. So I all the best to all of you, and I hope that you will read this topic more because it's extremely interesting. I'm sorry I couldn't cover it in more detail. If there are any doubts, I'd like to take them now.
Thank you, Dr. Divya, for the wonderful condensation of a very vast topic. You've made tried your level best to put it in a nutshell. I was expecting many questions in the participants, though there is, I think, only one question. I think this question was posted quite earlier. I think we have covered this. They've asked us, throw some light on RNA and DNA-based therapeutics and scaffold. I think you have done that. Probably this student posted this question in the beginning of the presentation. You have put it across very nice. I will just like to ask a couple of questions. You mentioned that it's almost like a drama. Each character enters at the right time, and the amount of role they have to play should be appropriately played. Now, when we talk of biologic mediators, can you give us any information on which stage of cell cycle appropriately the growth factors play a role? There are different stages in a cell cycle.
Sorry, ma'am.
There are different stages.
One moment.
In the cell cycle. Divya, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Now I'm able to hear you. I've put on my earplugs.
The cell undergoes various stages in the cell cycle. So if we are to effectively harness the benefit of growth factors, which stage of cell cycle will they have their maximum benefit? Is there any information on this?
I'm not sure of this.
Okay. So because you mentioned at the right time.
I do not know. I'm sorry.
The situation of a drama where the actors have.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I would just like to add on. I think initially when you started off, you said.
I will try to get back to you on this, ma'am.
Tissue engineering triad. There are three factors: cells, scaffolds, and factors. Now, basically, there is a fourth dimension added to it.
Yes, ma'am.
Time and environment plays a very significant role. So, I think that has got
epigenetic. Yes, ma'am.
It is the G phase of the cell cycle that most of these factors play a role. So, I think the students have to make themselves familiar with various phases of cell cycle just to understand the benefit of these growth factors. And also to summarize, I think tissue engineering, we have just reached the level of these factors. The scaffolds and cells are still at the level of in vitro research, which is done under ideal environment. So we have a long way to go.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, can I add one sentence here, ma'am?
Yeah.
Can I add just one sentence here?
Yes.
Like you said, ma'am, I think this is another issue when we are growing in vitro, we are trying to produce these tissues. We must be wary of leaving them out for too long because we do not know what genetic changes will be induced by the environmental changes. So we should try to, like you said, ma'am, I'm just iterating the same thing again, that as far as possible in vivo.
There's a lot of overlap between the cell-based approach and the gene-based approach.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Anything else?
No, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Divya. Now I request
for such a well-organized.
Thank you, Dr. Divya. Thank you.
A very well-organized program, ma'am.
Thank you. I request the technical team to virtually present the certificate of appreciation. Dr. Divya, please accept this certificate of appreciation for your contribution.
Thank you, ma'am.
Shreyan? Shreyan? Please display the certificate of appreciation for Dr. Divya. I am sorry, Dr. Divya. I think he is offline. We will.
That's
mail
fine,
you
ma'am. Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for this opportunity.
With this, we come to the end of today's program. We will resume our program scheduled tomorrow by 9 a.m. Requesting all the participants to log in before 9 a.m. Thank you, one and all.